Anita Kathiresan. I'm a fertility physician in Houston, Texas, at a practice called Center of Reproductive Medicine. And Roohi is also another fertility physician on the panel. I'll let her introduce herself too.
Hi, everyone. My name is Roohi Jeelani, and I'm another fertility doctor in the Midwest. I'm at Bios Fertility in Chicago, and looking forward to this chat. And then we'll introduce everybody, and I guess just go in alphabet. Kumkum, do you want to go next?
All right. Hey, everyone. I'm Kumkum Patel. I'm a gastroenterologist and a mom of two. I went through IVF twice. I just recently moved from Chicago to sunny Orange County, California, and I am pumped to talk about my story with these incredible ladies who've become my friends because of this journey.
Yeah, my name is Flora Sinha. I am a internal medicine physician in Southern California. Kumkum, you're so close to me. I love it. And I have one beautiful, almost 5-year-old, and I went through IVF a few times, a number of times, which I'll talk about soon. But I echo Kumkum about being friends with you all because of this journey. It's a club that not a lot of people want to be a part of, but truly is completely filled with incredibly strong women. So thankful.
All right. Last but not least at all, Anita, do you want to?
Hi, I am Anita Patel. I am a pediatric critical care doctor and pediatrician. I'm in Washington, D.C. I do academic medicine and also lots of yoga. And I have a little bit of a different story on my IVF journey, so I'm really excited to share and echo what other people have said. You know, you guys are some of my closest friends now, so again, it's not a club many people want to go through, but I think a lot of us are really grateful for it.
I agree. I'm going to just circle back and then I know I'll hand it to you, but I not only am I a fertility doctor, but I've gone through fertility myself, and I couldn't say that even more. It's not something that you look forward to, but I think the community that I've built, it's just fantastic. I've gained so many friends and more like sisters, right? Where I feel like there's this unique bond, but I love it.
Roohi, one more person to introduce, Amita.
Wait, Amita, wait, sorry.
That's okay, no problem. No worries. My name's Amita. I'm a cardiothoracic anesthesiologist. Also been through IVF, been through, I guess, 3 years of infertility. So blessed with my first child, and we're all new moms, so it's pretty, Kumkum and Anita, all of us had babies around the same time, so we're truly lucky. And yeah, I mean, like everyone has echoed, like infertility is kind of a club that I never really thought I'd be a part of, but I feel blessed in many ways because I've gained all these new friends and amazing sisters. So yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Anna, do you want to?
Yeah, so I just want to say I think all of you are awesome, and I love how much of the infertility journey you have shared. I think it's just so helpful to so many people. So I just wanted to say that. Just to start off, why kind of even talking about fertility and why is that important? So, fertility, as women, as we get older, there is a decline in egg number and egg quality. And fertility education is something that not all people are aware of. And sometimes, this education happens later on in life. And so another reason why it's great that we're all here talking about it. And, in addition, all of us being physicians, it's something that, as we kind of first focus on our training and our profession, and it's something that sometimes takes a back seat. So, so I'm glad we're talking about it, and it's an important thing to talk about. So with that, I will let all of you ladies talk about your fertility journeys. And Kumkum, I guess you want to start since you started earlier.
Okay. So it's funny that, we talk about egg quality decreasing with age, and when I started my fertility journey, I was 29 years old. And so I didn't think that IVF and infertility would be something that I would even ever have to face. I thought in my head that because I was a healthy person, I was a non-drug abuser, I was a good human being, that, infertility was not going to be something that I was going to be, quote unquote, hit with. And, and so we started trying naturally, obviously, for over a year and a half, actually. And at the time, we were stressed out. We were in residency. Both my husband and I were in residency together. We were trying to get into our subspecialty fellowships. So, we tried to be as calculated about this as possible as we are with our jobs and our lives. I said, I was going to time out with my periods. I was going to do the temperature testing. I was going to eat better, eat right, exercise, try, meditation so I could be less stress-free, and none of those worked. And I didn't feel like I was even ready to come to terms with having to see a fertility specialist, much less even be classified as having infertility issues. And so, I went to a doctor similar to the same doctors as the one that Amita saw in New York. And my husband and I went, and I found an appointment that was so early in the morning that no one would see me. I almost wanted it to be a covert experience because I was so embarrassed that at 29 years old, I was going to go see a fertility specialist and seek help. So that's how I kind of went and sought after it. And I went through the gamut of all the tests. I had I had the hysterosalpingogram. I had all the blood work. And yes, I do have a history of PCOS, but none of my markers for blood markers like the LH, FSH, none of those things came back abnormal. And so I was dumbfounded as to why I was having infertility issues. But we tried IUI, that failed, and we were considered what they call IVF of unknown significance or unknown cause for infertility. And so there I was with a label that didn't make sense in my head, and I was really torn apart. And most of all, which was I think the worst part, I was alone because I didn't know any other 29-year-old in my age group and no friends of my own who were trying to get pregnant at the time or who would actively talk about it to have undergone IVF. So I did IVF. That was my only way that I was able to get pregnant. We froze 6 embryos and we used the best quality egg. And that was, I only fortunately had to do one round, and I was blessed with our first son. And then I went through it again for a second time to get my second son. But, through this journey, I was quiet up until about maybe almost a year ago, when I started thinking, okay, I should come out with it. And I think on Instagram, with the help of these amazing ladies, I came out and finally told the world, hey, I struggled. I have been undergone this journey, and you are not alone. And this is something that a lot of us face. And so that was kind of why. And I wanted people to know that sometimes it's uncontrollable factors, and mine was infertility of unknown significance. So that was my journey. And I want to be able to empower others if they're going through the same.
That's awesome. And I think you're right, Kumkum, when you talk about it, I felt very similar. I was also 28, 29 when we started trying and seeing a fertility doctor. And of course, being a fertility doctor, I thought I knew it all. I was a fellow. So I was like, oh, of course I got this. So I told Anita about this. So I treat myself like under the table and then like blame, oh, it's because it didn't work because, I was doing it under the table, which is not true. Knowing doctors, like if you get treatment no matter how, and it still counts. But yeah, you're right. Age is a huge factor, and we tend to think, but I'm not old, and why is this happening to me? And it shouldn't. But unfortunately, we're fortunate. It doesn't discriminate. Anyone can be affected.
Yes.
Right. All right.
Should I go next?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have secondary infertility, and in all honesty, I didn't even know what that was until I was diagnosed with it. So for those who don't know what it is, secondary infertility is having trouble conceiving naturally after you have conceived successfully, naturally, the first time. So I had Gia, my 4-year-old, naturally didn't have any problems getting pregnant within 3 to 4 months of trying. I was pregnant with her, and I had a difficult pregnancy. I went into preterm labor with her. It was a really tough road. And I think afterwards, I just wasn't mentally and physically ready to start trying according to my like presumed timeline that I had put on myself. And by the time we were ready to try, I was almost 34 when I sought my first infertility evaluation. We were trying for about 7 to 8 months. Knowing that I was under the age of 35, I knew I was still a little early, but I wanted to get ahead of the game. Being in the medical field, I knew all of the guidelines, and this is stuff that I would counsel my own patients on about when to seek infertility care. So I went to the first doctor, and she told me I was too young and that I needed to essentially take a weekend away with my husband and drink a lot of wine. And I was blamed on a lot of stress, which we were. I'm a full-time physician. Commuting through LA is a whole another job on its own. My husband at that time was in a grueling fellowship. We honestly didn't have too much time together, but I was tracking. I mean, I was doing everything right by the books. So, in a certain sense, I believed her. I continued to wait. We tried maybe for another 3-ish months. And I sought care from a different doctor, and we started workup, and everything was quote unquote normal in my workup. There were a lot of potential maybes, maybe, a low egg count, but then we got enough eggs out, potentially blocked fallopian tube, but then when I repeated the test, it was fine. And so we didn't really know an exact reason. My story was a little different because we did round 1, which was unsuccessful. My doctor immediately wanted me to do an ERA, which is basically a test of the uterine lining receptors. And there's a standard amount of hours of when your embryo should be transferred. And that test was basically kind of a dummy cycle. So you do all the hormones and everything else, and instead of a transfer, they do a biopsy of the uterine lining. So that sample was sent, I think, to Spain or something crazy, to a lab, and they tested it and realized that my receptors were actually more sensitive earlier than what was standard. So for the 3rd round, we adjusted that. I got pregnant. And at about 6-ish weeks, I miscarried. So, after all of that, my husband and I sat down and we really just did a lot of soul searching. We realized that, in the last 2 years between fellowship, graduation, new jobs, commute, my own job, having a toddler, everything, we had lost our relationship with each other, with our child, with our parents, with our friends. We kind of just isolated ourselves. We put so much on hold. I had lost myself. I just mentally wasn't ready to move forward yet for another round. So we decided to stop. And you really don't hear that decision very often. At that time, it was the right decision for us. And that was almost like a year to this day when we decided to do that. And, we realized that we needed to take some time and just sit with what we have. We are so blessed with each other, with our beautiful child, and never say never in the future. But as of right now, that's where we are. So that's my story.
Awesome. That's so good to hear. I think it's good, right? I know, like when you hear both sides.
It's good to hear 2 different kind of journeys. Every fertility journey is different, and sometimes making that decision to stop is part of it, and it's a hard decision or a break, but I often will discuss that with patients because it's very stressful, just physically, emotionally, and it can be a really hard road. So, but I think doing what you can to get through it, and the support is important. And so I end up supporting the patients, whatever decision it ends up being, because really, that's what's most important.
I think I'm up. So I have a little bit of a different story. And it's, just to take a moment, it kind of pulls at my heartstrings to hear Kumkum and Flora's stories, and I know Amita's story too next, just because we all really went through this together, and it just, I remember when you made that decision, and I'll never forget it. So I thought it was the strongest thing. Anyways, so my story. I forgot to say that I did just have a baby.
Very important.
Mom.
Not at all.
But yeah, so I did just have a baby. And my story is a little different in that I actually don't have the diagnosis of infertility, but I did go through IVF. So as I mentioned, I am in academic medicine. My job has basically been my baby and my boyfriend for a long time. And I found my husband later in life. So we met when I was 34 going on 35, actually 33 going on 34, got engaged at 35. And we did have some rough times in the beginning of our relationship because his sister got diagnosed with breast cancer. And she happens to be my age. Because of that, she got genetic testing, and it turns out that she had the BRCA mutation, which is one of the genes that predisposes you to breast and ovarian cancer. And because of that, then the whole family got tested. And I share this because my partner is very open, but he ended up also having the BRCA mutation. So we found out about this really quite early in our relationship. And fast forward to getting engaged, I was 36, and I knew I wanted to have a family. But I also, seeing his sister go through surgeries, a couple surgeries, chemotherapy, it was incredibly difficult for his family. And one thing when we were talking about planning our family was my husband really, and me too, we found it difficult to knowingly pass along this genetic mutation to our children. And a detail is that if you have, because he has the mutation, there was a 50-50 chance that our children would also have it. So it's not like it was 1 in 5 or 1 in 10 or 1 in 20. It was a 50-50 chance. So at that point, I actually didn't know that we had options. And this is one of sort of the beauties of social media. I was already close friends through Instagram with Roohi and Natalie. And I remember chatting with them, like, do I have options? And they were the ones that said, yes, you do, actually. You can go through IVF, get genetic testing on your embryos, and you can then select the embryos that don't have the mutation. So it's literally because of social media that I found out that I had options and what my options were. And Anu, you've been incredibly supportive as well, from when I started to share. So that's what I ended up doing. And we also sort of reversed orders of things. Just I echo what my colleagues have already said. I obviously started my fertility journey later in life at 36, and I wanted to make sure that the second we were married, we could have our baby. So I actually went through the egg harvesting and genetic testing phase prior to getting married. Well, I'm sure we'll go into this later, but making the decision to go through IVF for me was a difficult one in that I have a history of PMDD, which is premenstrual dysphoric disorder. I've never responded well to any hormones, therefore never was able to be on birth control. So the idea of pumping myself up with hormones was really scary. But I had my Instagram tribe to get me through it. And I was super lucky in that we ended up having a couple embryos that were good. We had 3. And I was able to, right after we got married, transfer, and that made my little 3.5-month-old Sita now. So It worked out really well, and I was lucky. And yeah, so that's my sort of unconventional story.
Love it.
Yeah. Amita, you want to share your beautiful
Yeah.
story?
Sure. So, I guess I got married around, I think at the age of 33. And so, I met my husband like a little later in life, but I didn't think it was like that late. I was like, okay, 33 is okay. We tried for about 2 years to get pregnant naturally. And then at the age of 35, I decided to seek help. So I went to see a fertility specialist. And I saw someone and she was like, listen, she's like, listen, I know you're in the medical field. My fertility doctor was like, why don't we give IUIs a try and see if that works? She's like, but I wouldn't do it for that long. So we did 3 rounds of IUIs, but during that time we also had I had developed ovarian cysts, so I had to hold off. So it was like about a year long of a process. And then we decided to pursue IVF. So at that time, we did 1 round, and at that time I was still 36. So I was, we also did genetic testing on those embryos. So I had gotten 2 embryos, and we transferred the first one, and I got pregnant. And then everything was fine. We were super happy, and um, 13 weeks we had an anatomy ultrasound, and it turned out that the baby had genetic abnormalities. And I don't think I really actually shared the full story with everybody here, and I don't really expect to cry. I didn't intend to cry, but at that time that embryo was not but was we had to make a decision. And the baby turned out to have genetic abnormalities which would not have sustained life. And it was a tough decision for us to make, because as a physician, I knew that this would be I didn't know what quality of life, that if this baby made it, what type of quality of life this baby would have. So we actually had to make a decision to terminate that pregnancy, which was probably one of the most difficult days of my life. But it's something that we went through, and we went through it. We took a break after that time. There was a lot of emotions. I had to seek therapy, just to understand some deep-rooted issues that I was dealing with related to this. And we ended up transferring the second embryo, and the second embryo, actually that transfer failed. So then we had taken a break. And we ended up, I decided I'd like to pursue another round. So we went through another round. And during that round, I had gotten 1 normal embryo. And I did genetic testing. So 1 was genetically normal. And at that time, I decided, all right, I don't know. I was like deciding, I was very nervous because I was like, okay, I have 1 embryo. I spoke to my fertility doctor. We decided to do an ERA, which is what that Flora had done as well, where, we tried to find the optimal time for transfer. And I know Anu and Roohi can tell you guys more about that. So at that time, I really thought okay, this is my last shot, in the sense that I really didn't know if I had it in me to do another IVF cycle. I was burnt out. I was going through a slew of emotions. Fertility had taken over my life. It affected my relationships. It affected my everything around me. And so I decided, all right, we'll transfer it. So funny enough, we transferred that embryo, and I cheated. I took a pregnancy test that weekend before, because it was I took it on a Saturday, and I thought, okay, well, I'm gonna get a blood test on Monday, so why don't I just check what it is? So I took it and it was negative. Like my urine test was negative, and I thought, all right, oh, I was completely distressed in despair. I was like, all right, I got to come up with another plan. So that plan, I started looking that weekend. I remember I started making calls. I called everyone. I was like, all right, I'm going to look into adoption, because I wanted to have like a plan in my head about what plan B would be, because I didn't think I didn't want to get the negative result and then, you know, not have something in my head so that I could move forward. And then that Monday, I remember I got a call, and I was at work, and I just heard a voicemail from my fertility doctor, and she's like, Amita, I got to tell you, got good news. And she hung up, and I was like, what? So I had a blood drawn. My blood draw that from that day was it was 400, so I was actually pregnant. So I remember I think I told Anu, and I told Anita, and we were just like, what? Like it was an amazing day. And you know, that's me, that pregnancy gave me my baby. So yeah. It's been a crazy roller coaster, and you know, I haven't really shared my full story because, you know, I was nervous. But I've also realized, you know, there's people who have gone through the same thing, and I really want them to understand that, you know, they're not alone, you know? So, yeah.
And thank you for even creating this. I just wanted to tell you too, I've had patients that have had that same exact journey and same decisions, and you know, it's so hard. It's so hard, and but I think you're so brave and courageous for sharing that. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think that I think all of us have said, like, each of us have their own journey, and it's so different. And you know, I've also get messages on Instagram from people who've had different journeys, and you know, I I just really think that, like, we can, there's so many reasons why we can come together, and just us going through this process has made me stronger. And you know, I want other people to know that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and no matter what decision or what path that they have, like, I really wish them well, you know. And like, I feel that a lot of the people I've met who have been through infertility or been through IVF, a lot of them, like, just have a sense of, you know, strength, and you know, you actually connect with them without even knowing them. So yeah.
Very true.
So sorry.
Thank you for sharing that. I mean, I can't even say. I know it's so hard, and you know, with my second cycle and with my daughter, it was similar. And then I can't like fathom being there, but I just remember her Down syndrome screening coming back positive, and it was just like your world ends. And it's, you know, it's so tough because this child that you wanted forever, and now, you know, you're like, what do I do with it? It's very scary. So thank you for being so candid, all of you guys. It's so tough. And Flora, I appreciate your break because I'm on a break. Also, every time I say that, I think of friends that I'm on a break, and sometimes you just need a mental break. But what are your guys's? I know for me it was very hard socially. I come from a very cultured Indian family where, you know, the answer to everything is just don't stress and it'll happen, or you're not eating right, or not enough Indian food, or, you know, that's typically the answer, or haldi doodh, or, you know, some sort of magic concoction. But it's never fertility. And it was very hard for me to tell my family and my parents. I think my mom's the only one that I can openly kind of talk to her about it. But even now, I like not shy away from, but I could tell that they get more uncomfortable than I get, and I don't want to put them in that position, so I don't talk about it. But how did you break with the South Asian culture, families, just that stigma of fertility in general?
All right, I guess I'll start. You know, one of the things that's really important is to realize that we are able to kind of talk about these things because it has been in retrospect. So if you're currently watching this and you're in the midst of it and you haven't had the strength to maybe come out to your family or to your friends, please know that you're not alone in that, because I was one of the first people not to come out and say that I went through IVF. I was almost embarrassed. And being from a family where my mother got pregnant without any trouble, my older sister got pregnant without any trouble and had two beautiful children, I felt like there was something wrong with me. And when the tests that, the blood tests and the anatomical tests came back normal, I felt like, okay, maybe this was God's way of saying, okay, you really don't deserve to be a mother, or you've put way too many other things on, in front, or your career in the front, and maybe this is your punishment. Maybe you're not a good human being. And it was a lot of soul searching, because what is it like? What have I done in my 30 years of life? Like, how was I going to improve myself as a human being? Like, was I not worthy of becoming a mother? And again, when you don't have friends that you know of who are undergoing it, or you haven't shared that journey with anyone else, you feel like, well, I can't really ask anyone. So you begin searching on the internet, where you can almost anonymously look for answers, right? And you look for other people who've been courageous enough to kind of share their stories, and then you realize there's a lot of other people out there. And sometimes if you just reach out and say, hey, me too, that's all someone else wants to hear, the hey, me too. And so I had a couple of other people reach out to me and say, like, I have trouble, and like, this is kind of what I went through. What do you think? And in my head, I was like, oh my God, do I tell them that I'm a needle phobe? I hate hormones. I can't even handle the hormonal changes right before my period, much less I'm going through this crazy time with IVF. Like, no, I can't. I'm perceived as perfect. And so therefore, I'm just going to keep my mouth shut. And this included not telling our parents. And so forget telling the whole rest of the world. We didn't even tell the two people who were very closest to my husband and I. So we were the only two people who had this secret. And internally, we would cry. And I'd never really seen my husband cry, until we had to try over and over again, month after month, with negative tests. And we were like, wow, like, maybe there's something wrong with us. Maybe God doesn't want us to become parents. And so that was one of those things. And we're like, you know what? When it does happen for us, we're going to be, one, extremely grateful. And two, we're going to let other people know how tough it was. Because when people see your social media posts on Facebook or Instagram, and they look, as they say, Insta perfect, people assume that, you've just been checking off all of those life tick boxes without ever having to have, undergone any hurdles. And if you don't talk about those hurdles, people just assume that it's been easy for you, and you almost gain people's, not forget the envy, people's hatred. People like, oh, I don't want to really talk to you or talk to you about my failures, because you haven't undergone any. So I'm here to bust that myth. Everyone is undergoing something, whether it is, financial, social, emotional, something. And especially in the IVF journey, everyone is struggling in some way. And so I decided that, when I got on Instagram, and it was actually Infertility Awareness Week, and I saw all of these amazing women that I'm on the panel with right now talk about their infertility journey. It was like it was the last day of the week. It was Friday. And I was like, okay, I think I'm going to finally go out there and tell the world. And I remember I had sent an Instagram DM to like 5 or 6 of these ladies. And I was like, okay, should I have the courage? And they had already come out there with their story. And I was like, trembling in my pants. I finally went and told my parents. And I was like, you know what? I cried as I told everybody that, I went through this thing, and that I was infertile, and the children that had come out of it were as a product and as a result. And so, they felt sad, but they were happy that I had shared, something that was difficult. And so that's something that I will never, forget, that, my family was like, okay, well, we're sorry that we weren't there originally, but now we are. And so that's something I hope I can stand for someone else, that pillar of strength, to know that, please don't feel alone. This is not your fault. And whatever it is, just be open and honest, because you never know what someone else is going through. And maybe they need you to be strong first before they can show their strength as well. So that's my story.
Yeah, I mean, I would reiterate that too. I think that, since I went through this, I mean, I think my immediate family knew when we were going through it, IVF, and I was grateful to have their support. Like I live with my in-laws, and I mean, I'm so blessed. They were the most supportive when we were going through this process. And I think that a lot of my struggles about, the about the cultural issues related to also me, like Kumkum says, like where I always had these expectations of me being perfect, and like I have to act a certain way, I have to be a certain way, and why is this happening to me? There was a lot of blame, and I began to realize that like nobody's perfect, and actually there's strength in imperfection, and there's beauty in imperfections, and I would go to parties, and, initially we would be quiet. Like people would ask me like, oh, when are you getting pregnant? Or, like we'd be at a family event, and it's just natural. It happens, especially in the Desi community. Like you're married. All right. When are you having a baby? We want a baby. And I don't think I think they mean well, but there were times when it was really hurtful. And I really thought about like, oh, I really didn't even want to socialize with people because I didn't want to talk about it. But once I opened up about it, I mean, there were people that I met, not like there were people that I'd meet at these parties and people I hadn't spoken to in a long time, or they saw my Instagram post and they were like, I'm so sorry about what you've been through. And, I've been through the same thing, or I'm so sorry. And even aunties, like I would tell, there was one auntie who was like, well, okay, so, they're like, all right, so when are you getting pregnant? And at that point, I was just like, I opened up and I was like, listen, we're having trouble. And I realized that maybe I should have just, instead of deflecting the questions, I should have just been open with them, because, that auntie was like, oh, I'm so sorry. And these things happen and it's going to happen. So like, I realized that although there are people who may not be nice and may not have good intentions, but overall, I really do think people do have good intentions. And sometimes when you open up, you'd be surprised by the love and the support that you'll receive. So that's kind of been my perspective on things. And I think it's important because, like, it also, all of you guys, as all of you guys know, by talking about it, there's been a lot more education in the community about it. Like, like Roohi, it was so powerful when you started showing that you were going through a cycle, and what you were going through. I'm sure you received like thousands of DMs about it, because it's really powerful for women in our culture to see someone going through the same thing and someone openly talking about it.
Anita, what would you say, or Flora, like your biggest takeaways are for people kind of on this panel and listening?
Yeah, my takeaway is very similar to Kumkum and Amita's kind of put together. I was actually very open about my journey from the beginning. I opened up to my parents, my in-laws, a very close group of friends, my staff, because I knew what that entailed. I knew I was going to need support. I didn't really realize how in-depth this all was going to be. So, I mean, I think everyone for me said the right things, everyone around me. And there were always like, the comments where, oh, just be positive, don't stress about it. Whatever is meant to be will be. And, all the stuff that you don't want to hear. But there are only so many words people can use as comfort when, especially if they themselves haven't gone through it. What really got to me, I think, were the unsolicited questions from strangers, from patients, from aunties, from uncles, from, the aunties and uncles, like kids, and people who I did not know well enough to be posed that question. I think one of the funniest stories was I was approached by a woman in a park. I don't know who she was. I was with Gia. I was having a perfectly fine day, and it was in the middle of one of my cycles. I don't remember which one. And so she came up to me and she's like, "Oh, is that your daughter? So when are you going to give her a sibling?" And I kind of looked at her, and I think at that point I was at like the sarcastic stage. So I was like, "Oh, let me go buy her one right now. Do you know a store?" Maybe not the best answer, but I was also quickly very angry at. It seemed like when you were trying to get pregnant, everyone was asking you about when you were going to get pregnant. it felt so heavy at that time, even from patients who were comfortable enough to talk to me and ask me about my personal journey and experiences. It was just a constant reminder that at that time, I would use the word fail. I actually don't use that word when I'm describing my infertility or my fertility journey. I usually say unsuccessful because I didn't fail at anything. My doctor didn't fail at anything. I did everything right, and so did my doctor. These are just probabilities and numbers and science, and we do the best we can to beat the odds. So, you know, I definitely changed my mindset, my verbiage, and when people do ask me about, you know, is she the only one? I'm like, well, yeah, she's the one. And we tried and decided to stop because we had trouble. And it's funny how many people actually become really uncomfortable. And so I hope it makes them realize, you know, if they're not ready for a hard conversation, they shouldn't be posing questions. And others, you know, have been so comforting and have opened up so many wonderful conversations, which is another reason which I love this community for. All the messages, I think, you know, a few a day I get about others going through infertility and not wanting to open up, but wanting to confide in someone. And it's nice to be able to connect. There's only so many words you can use to describe what we're going through and the feelings and the emotions. And so to be able to know what the word devastation in this context, that level, that depth of devastation or anger or guilt, to be able to connect over those words, it is so powerful. So opening up for me, being upfront and just telling my story and sharing just has made this so much easier to go through.
Yeah, I mean, I echo what Flora was saying about, you know, one of the reasons why I decided to open up about my story. Well, I guess there was really two reasons. Number one, I, as a physician, had no idea that I had options, you know, with having a genetic mutation. And I was like, if I, as a physician, don't know that I have options, pretty sure other people don't know they have options. And secondly, you know, my decision to share, you know, as South Asian women, we're not supposed to talk about our feelings. We're not supposed to talk about anything, right? We're supposed to be perfect on the outside, although if you follow me on Instagram, I never, ever pretend to be that way. But particularly airing your medical laundry, you know, you all talked about sharing your infertility. You know, when I first told my parents that I was going to be pursuing IVF for this genetic mutation, they said, no, you don't have to do that. It's too expensive. Just, you know, do what you're supposed to be doing and go from there. And their response, you know, I understood where they were coming from. That's how they were raised. But I was like, you know what? You raised an independent lady, and that's not how I am. And I really felt strongly that there were other women, not just in the South Asian community and so many other communities, that likely had to make these decisions that I had to make about sort of pursuing IVF for other reasons. And when I did share, I shared almost every single poke on Instagram. And there was another reason why I did that, because I was kind of pissed that I didn't know what to like expect. You know, thank God I had Anita and Flora and Melissa and so many other people, you know, who were going through it, who told me. But I was like, I want to know, like, how many pokes a day. I want to know what it feels like. I want to know about the weight gain, you know, just all the little details about IVF that, you know, words only go so far. And particularly being in medicine, and for me being in academic medicine, where you're really not supposed to talk about these things, you know, you're not supposed to talk about childbearing, let alone going through IVF and having to run to the call room, you know, in the middle of the day to give yourself shots. Like, that's not something that people talk about. And I really thought about my residents, fellows, and medical students. And I was like, you know what? I want to put this out in the open, just like Flora did as well. I was one of those people that told everybody. Like, if you said hello to me on the street, I was like, hello, I'm going through IVF, you know? So like, that was like my one-liner. But I wanted to do that because I wanted my trainees to have someone also to talk to about this, and to know that it's okay to talk about IVF, it's okay to talk about egg freezing, it's okay to talk about getting married and thinking about your fertility later in life, you know, I just felt very kind of angry when I started the process that there was not enough out there. And you know, the takeaway and the side effect is of sharing. Not only did I make some of the best friends that I have through social media and sharing all of them on this panel, and a few others, of course, but you know, the community that develops around you is phenomenal. And I'm sure you guys have this experience too. You know, when I shared I was going through IVF, some of my closest friends came to me and said, "Hey, I went through IVF too." And I was like, how did I not know that? You know, I mean, it's such a secretive, and I understand, you know, some people don't want to share and that's okay. But I think in stepping up and sharing, you're suddenly able to be a resource for people to talk to. Just, I'm no expert. I can't talk about the medicine on it, but I can talk about the feelings and the shots and, you know, the ups and downs and the weight gain and the this and the that, you know? So my takeaways is that in sharing, it opened up a group of friendships and a community that I never thought I'd be a part of. But I'm so grateful for it. It is, you know, the hardest and the best thing to ever happen to me. So that's all I have to say.
Awesome. Thank you guys for just being so candid. And I think we all can just gain so much for this from just hearing each other's stories. And I think it's so important not to, like, you brought up a really good point, Anita, because it's not just the South Asian community. In general, we're so fearful of talking about, you know, something so intimate, that when we do, like, some of my closest friends are like, "Oh yeah, I have that too. Oh yeah, I did IVF." I'm like, "You did? Why didn't anyone tell me? I mean, I could have done it like years before. I was so scared," you know, because it's like built in your head that that's not how it's supposed to be. But I think this is a great conversation. Really good tears, much needed.